4 former Red Raiders could hear their name called. I break down every single one of them and their opportunity to make the NBA on today's episode of Locked On Texas Tech.
Are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Texas Tech. Today is Wednesday afternoon, June 22nd, and I am Emory Lyda, your host. It's been a little while. Sorry for the delay. I have been up in Wisconsin over the last weekend and then came back and had quite a bit to deal with, so I apologize for the delay there. But worry not, we are back and we are better than ever. So today, with one day left before the NBA draft, I thought it would be a good idea to take a look back at some of the basketball players that have left Texas Tech over the last year and just take a look at what their NBA draft prospects look like. And to give you a little bit of insight, there are 4 NBA draft prospects, or guys that were entered into the NBA draft in the pool of draft prospects that played at Texas Tech over the last few years. Those are Kyler Edwards, who obviously transferred to Houston for his last season of eligibility, Bryson Williams, who played at UTEP before coming to Texas Tech, Adonis Arms, who obviously went to a variety of colleges, then to Winthrop and then to Texas Tech. And then lastly, technically speaking, you could see Davion Warren be drafted as well, as he went to Hampton before coming to Texas Tech. So all 4 of those guys have their name in the NBA draft, and so they are eligible to be selected tomorrow night. However, in talking with some of the people in draft circles and seeing some of the buzz around them, it looks like there are 2 guys that have a realistic shot at getting drafted tomorrow night. And those 2 guys are Bryson Williams and Adonis Arms. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with talking about Bryson Williams, because I feel like he is the guy that most Texas Tech fans would have as the most likely guy to get drafted by an NBA team this year. And that's for good reason, too, because he was arguably the best player on Texas Tech last season. He had a really solid season, 14 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 1.1 assists, shot 53.5% from the field, 41.7% from 3 on nearly 3 attempts per game. If you look at what he was able to do offensively, that is something that really carried over from UTEP, and really is a 3-dimensional game for Williams offensively. It provides quite a bit of opportunity on the inside. He's a good finisher at the rim. He can create offense from the low post and the high post. He's flashed a little bit as a passer, although I will say that is an area that needs quite a bit of development from him. And he can operate as a rollman on the inside. And then you get to his mid-range game. I think that's really, if you're looking at pure strengths of his, he is a great mid-range shooter. Now, is he good enough to where he's going to be taking that shot a lot at the NBA level? That's to be seen, because to take mid-range shots at the NBA level, you have to be a player that's good enough to warrant taking those shots. And that's a valid question. But for Bryson Williams, obviously he has the mid-range ability. Then you also factor in the three-point shooting, and he's someone that can really space the floor. The shooting was something we had questions about heading into last year. We had a podcast on No Middle Madness that went in detail on Bryson Williams and what we thought his potential shooting ability was going to be. And we thought an optimistic side of things would be about a 36% shooter. But the way things worked out, he ended up being nearly a 42% shooter. He was above 40% for most of the season. And from the top of the key, he looks really comfortable. But really the big area where he had strides last year, and what I think is going to help him, if you're looking at him sticking on an NBA team, is his defensive versatility. He became a lot more switchable at Texas Tech, really showcased the ability defensively. A lot of work when it came to developing Williams from a scheme standpoint. He was able to switch at times 1 through 5. I will say probably that's a little bit overplayed, and against NBA guards, that's going to be a struggle. But certainly a guy with a lot of talent and potential when it comes to offense. You know what you're going to get offensively from him from day one. And so having a guy like Williams on the court, obviously the age is going to be a negative factor for him. But he's going to be quite old in terms of the pool of players that he's going to be selected against. So that might be something that plays into factor, as he's 24 years old already. But still, Bryson Williams is a guy that is on the NBA radar for sure. We saw at the G League Combine, he really teared up the 2 scrimmages there. So good, in fact, that he got one of the 6 invites to the NBA Combine after the G League Combine, and he ended up in Chicago. And in the scrimmages for the NBA Combine, he looked pretty decent. I believe he had one game where he had 14 points, showed good hustle on both ends, seemingly turned a few heads there as well. So for Williams, the NBA and the G League Combine were both places where he was able to make an impression on people. And when you look at draft circles, that is what is important, as just being able to make that impression is going to allow him to have more workout opportunities. We've seen him work out with no less than 8 teams over the last month. That's just of the public teams. We've certainly seen quite a bit of support for him on draft Twitter, with multiple guys adding him to their draft boards. And we've seen just in general a lot of interest in him when it comes to his pro future. And so for that reason, I'm not entirely sold on him being a draft pick, but at the same time, I have to say the fact that so many teams have shown interest, that people that are legitimately in the know seem to buy him being a possible draft candidate, I have to assume that at a minimum, he's going to be on a 2-way contract ending next year. He's going to be playing in the summer league, no question about that. And if you look at his role, I would say that his ability to come in to be a positive player offensively is going to be a positive attribute that teams are going to be looking for. So I would expect him to go in and instantly secure a 2-way spot. If he doesn't get it right away after draft season, he certainly will on an Exhibit 10 in the offseason that would convert to a training camp deal. So we'll have to see. I'd put the odds of him getting drafted about 35%. I feel like that seems about right, as it really comes down to what teams are looking for in the second round. If they want a guy that has the potential to play from day one, Williams is going to be on the short list of guys that you want to take there. If you're looking at the future potential, a lot of teams oftentimes will look for raw prospects in that range. So we'll have to see. But regardless, Williams seems to be set up to go the NBA route, to have a good opportunity to at least get a 2-way and get his foot in the league. So that is a major positive. And after last year, it is not unexpected at all. Bryson Williams was an incredible player for Texas Tech, an incredible player for UTEP, and a good player at Fresno State as well. So that's all for Bryson Williams. But coming up next, I'm going to talk about one of the more intriguing cases in all of the NBA draft, and that is Adonis Arms. But first, our friends at Built Bar have come up with yet another incredible product. So from the people who invented Healthy and Tasty, they have brought the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar already if you've listened to Locked On Texas Tech. But guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the puffs treatment, and that is amazing. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love, and a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time. So go to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. And just like all Built Bars, they're made with really good protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. They're healthy. They only include 150 calories, the same nutritional value that all Built Bars had. And they're also guilt-free because, again, they are good for you. They have all the nutritional value, and they will also be able to satisfy your sweet tooth and whatever you feel the need for. So go to Built.com right now. Use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 at Built.com and go try out the brand new coconut brownie chunk puffs. Thank you for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. One live NBA draft show is not enough for Locked On. The entire NBA channel is going live on NBA draft night. So if you have a favorite NBA team, make sure you subscribe now to their Locked On YouTube channel so you get notified when they go live on NBA draft night. I cannot wait to watch the NBA draft. I can't wait to see what the Blazers do with the number 7 pick after they just acquired Jeremy Grant. I'm a huge Blazers fan, so that made me happy after what we saw at the trade deadline. I have to say, it makes me feel good. But one guy that also makes me feel really good to see him getting interest on the NBA level is Adonis Arms. And we have seen that over the last month. Now, obviously, if you've listened to this podcast since the basketball season, you would know that I am very high on what Adonis Arms was able to do last year. I did not really expect that coming into the season. I didn't anticipate him playing a huge role. I'll be the first to admit I underestimated him. I was wrong. Adonis Arms, one of the best stories in all of college basketball last year. And when you look at what he was able to do on the season, really coming from Winthrop, he was a 6-man there, didn't play a ton of basketball just because they had so much depth there. They ran an 11-man rotation. But you have to say, Adonis Arms this past season showed out unlike anyone really expected. He put up 8.6 points per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, and 2.8 assists per game, playing really as a point guard for good portions of the season. I know Kevin McCullough got the official label, and obviously we had seen McCullough play a little bit more as a primary ball handler at the beginning of the season, but Arms really took on a lot of that role down the stretch of the season. His reads really good in the half court. I feel like he developed a lot as a player in the half court. His scoring ability, again, just like Bryson Williams, is someone that could score at all three levels, and that has a lot of merit and value to it because when you look at the NBA, you're looking for guys that have versatility they can play into a role, and Adonis Arms proved this year that he could be as adaptable as they come. I mean, you look at his stats from last season. He played good as a guard. He had a 20% assist rate, which is really good for someone that's played as a wing for most of his life. He shot 31% from three, which doesn't sound good, but when you consider that he went through multiple massive slumps, it's understandable. And also he made, I believe, 12 three-pointers off of pull-up attempts, which is impressive for someone that, again, has played mostly as a catch-and-shoot player and was kind of anticipated him not playing a lot as a guard. So the improvements he made there were incredible. Defensively at Winthrop was where he struggled. And at Texas Tech, we saw some of that. We had certain games where he was not a massive factor. Certainly against Kansas was one that comes to mind in Allen Fieldhouse where he really struggled defensively. For the most part, he was a positive defensive player, got overshadowed by just the sheer amount of depth defensively that Texas Tech had last year, but he was solid in his own right. So the wingspan is really good. Measured out, I believe, 6'11" wingspan. So +6 there. His vertical is really good, the highest on the team last year. The athleticism, the burst is there. He is a very positive athlete. And so it's not really a conventional situation where someone that comes into the draft as nearly a 24-year-old will turn 24 on Sunday. But certainly Adonis Arms is not someone that you would peg as maybe have the high potential and a lot of untapped potential. But we just saw him develop so much as a player in the last year. And it really, in talking to some people that I know around the NBA draft and talking to some of them when it comes to sort of scouting out what Adonis Arms brings to the table, that was the one thing that I think really caught a lot of people by surprise was just how much he was able to develop last year, kind of how that plays in, because even though he's 23, nearing 24, he's only played high-level basketball. This was his first season playing at a high major. He played mid-major basketball the year before, and really he hasn't played a defined role on the basketball circuit for more than a couple of years now. We saw play as a real lead scorer at the D2 level. Obviously, in JUCO, he had to fight, scratch and crawls way into the team. He had a massive growth spurt before that year in JUCO. So it's not like he's had a lot of time to really find himself as a player. So there's a lot of development going on there that makes the player that he was when he first came into college not who he is now. And specifically, since he got to Winthrop, we've seen more development from Arms in that sense than just about anyone else out there. So for that, it makes it really difficult to assess Arms because conventional wisdom would say that a player that's almost 24 is nearing their peak from a basketball standpoint. But Arms is such a positive athlete, and we've seen the skill develop so rapidly at Texas Tech where he seemed out of his element the first few games as a guard to by the end of the season playing as a primary ball handler in the last game of the season, having a really nice game against Duke where he put up 7 assists, only 2 turnovers. It's just really interesting because when I look at that, it kind of goes against the fundamental core of looking for high potential guys that haven't played a lot of basketball and are still very young. Arms ticks off the first box in that he hasn't really played a lot of high level basketball, but he's almost 24. You would expect him to suffer from a potential standpoint as a result of that. But in talking to people, it seems like they're still buying that there's a lot of room for growth for Arms. We've seen him as a versatile weapon. He can do so many different things. The ball handling really coming around sort of elevated his potential as a prospect. Because if you view that as a legitimate skill in the NBA to be a secondary ball handler, then you're talking about someone that can go in to day one. And if he can just have the shot sort of return to what it was at Winthrop and can be a 35-36% catch and shoot player like he should flash stuff in the half court this season, then that's a player that absolutely has a spot in the NBA rotation. And with that, it's no surprise that he's been worked out by over 10 NBA teams. teams that I've heard that have had interest with him were the Warriors, who brought him in for a workout, OKC as well, Milwaukee. Obviously, we've heard from a team like Indiana. All of those teams have had him in for a workout. So would not surprise me to see him possibly sneak into the second round, but I think more likely is that he ends up as a two-way guy, much like Bryson Williams will be. And certainly you're going to see him at the Summer League. I would be shocked if Adonis Arms doesn't end up playing Summer League ball. So he's going to be interesting to watch. I'm excited because I've mentioned this before, but Adonis Arms' story is really fun to cover. He's been one of the more heartwarming stories we've seen coming to Texas Tech for basketball, and just looking at how he's been able to do and make a name for himself and really put himself on the NBA map over the past few years. It's nothing short of an amazing miracle to see. So for Arms, this is just the next chapter for him. Don't know if he'll get called on draft night. I put his odds of getting drafted at probably about 20%, but still, I expect him to play in the Summer League, possibly get a two-way deal. And with how many teams showed interest in him, he's going to have a ton of suitors when it comes to finding his next move at the NBA level. But from two guys that have a reasonable shot of getting drafted to two guys that more than likely won't hear their name called, but are still intriguing for one way or another. Coming up next, I'll break down Kyler Edwards and Davion Warren and their NBA prospects. But first, we have a message from some of our sponsors. Back talking about draft night here, only one day until the NBA draft. I've been waiting for so long. On one hand, I'm excited to see how the high-end guys go. Will it really be Jabari Smith going number one overall? I am not high on Jabari Smith. I think that's a little bit of a stretch to have a guy that's basically an off-ball player playing as the number one pick in the draft and getting drafted to the Magic, but we'll see on that. Further down, you have guys like Jaden Ivey and where he'll end up. That's a good story for me. And then just in general, looking at the first round, I think it's going to be interesting to see how all those guys pan out, how many trades there's going to be. There's always so many different intriguing things going on NBA draft night. But one of the more overlooked things is what sort of guys end up getting Exhibit 10 contracts to the training camps for different teams heading into the next season, and how many teams get Vegas Summer League or how many players get Vegas Summer League invites, because it is usually quite a lot of players, quite a few of your favorite college players end up getting Summer League invites, even if it seemed like they more than likely wouldn't get them. I remember back in 2018, Tommy Hamilton got a Summer League invite with the Spurs, and Hamilton was a 7th or 8th man for Texas Tech at the time, so it was confusing there. But obviously, Summer League guys, you have to have 5 guys to practice against, and then you have usually a 10-man rotation in Summer League. So there's a lot of spots open for Summer League potential. So with that in mind, there's 2 guys for Texas Tech that played at Texas Tech over the last few years that come to mind as possible Summer League guys. And in one of their case, I think he has a shot at being a 2-way guy and more than likely will get an Exhibit 10. So I'm going to start out with Kyler Edwards, who is that aforementioned player that I feel like has a decent shot at getting an Exhibit 10 and certainly maybe even a 2-way as well. Edwards went to the University of Houston last year after having 3 seasons at Texas Tech. A move that was maybe a little bit surprising at first, considering Edwards had announced his intention to stay at Texas Tech, but he parlayed that at Houston into a solid season, averaging nearly 14 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. Edwards, when you're looking at how he came into college, a lot of people expected him to be a primary ball handler, be the one guard, but that ended up not really being the case over the course of his last 2 years in college. At Houston, he played primarily off ball, except for a mid part of the season where Houston had Jamal Sheed and Marcus Sasser go down. Also, Tremar Mark was lost for the season. They ended up getting Sheed back at some point, but Sasser and Mark never came back. So ended up putting a lot of the onus on Edwards to do playmaking, and he played pretty well in that role. But if you're looking at what NBA guys see from him, it's mainly as a wing where he has value. They see him as a guy that can hit 40% of his threes. Last season didn't really come close to that clip. He was at 33%. But the degree of difficulty on those shots at Houston was higher. And at Texas Tech, we saw 2 of his 3 years. He shot over 40%, including his last season, where he had quite a bit of volume, taking almost 5 threes a game when he shot 41%, or nearly 42% in 2021. So it's obvious that Edwards can shoot the ball pretty well. So I would expect that that's something plays a lot into him. One of my last articles for viewthematadors.com, I did write about Edwards and some of his underrated abilities, specifically on the defensive side of things, where he has quite a bit of defensive ability and instinct off the ball. He might be one of the best defenders that you're going to see in this draft. So that plays a lot into it. And his ability to play as a team defender is important because you're not really looking for wings and guys that are going to be fringe rotation pieces to be point of attack defenders, because you'll usually have a couple of lockdown guys for that. So for Edwards to make it in the league, he's got to be able to shoot well, and he's got to be able to play the team defense that we've seen him do, as well as continue to be a secondary ball handler. I think it's feasible to do all three of those things. He's not a player I see as having a really high ceiling when it comes to NBA play, just because a lot of his skill sets are capped by his athleticism, which isn't great, as well as the fact that his ball handling needs quite a bit of work to be a primary ball handler, but he could be a positive wing, and the shooting, the assisting, and the defense is all there, as well as that his rebounding ability is probably one of the most random elite abilities that most people don't really know about. But at Texas Tech, we saw some of it, and then at Houston, it was a massive strength of his. His tracking ability for rebounds is really impressive. I mean, averaging almost 6 rebounds a game as a guard, and he did so without a system that really plays heavily into that sort of rebounding numbers. So impressive for Edwards, but Davion Warren is the second guy I want to talk about. Warren, transfer from Hampton. We saw him light up the scoreboard at Hampton, was a 13th leading scorer in the NCAA in the 2020-2021 season. So Hampton, someone that has a lot of Davion Warren, not Davion Hampton. What the heck? But Davion Warren is somebody that has a lot of scoring ability. Like I mentioned, averaged over 21 points per game in the 2020-2021 season. Warren in 2022 at Texas Tech really showcased the defensive ability more. That was what stood out. When I talked about Edwards being a good team defender, Warren is more of a point of attack defender, aggressive. The hands is what sticks out. He averaged 1.4 steals per game this year, 2.1 steals per game last year at Hampton. That's really impressive. One of the more disruptive defenders out there. Shot 30% from three both years. Kind of disappointing in 2022, to be honest, because I thought that percentage was going to take a little bit of a spike, given his lower usage and the fact that more of his threes came off the ball. But at this point, Warren kind of is what he is. He's one of the younger seniors compared to what Arms and Bryson Williams are, almost a full year younger than him. So that plays into his factor. And obviously, we've seen him play as a lethal shooter or as a lethal scorer. We know he has pretty good finishing ability on the inside. Certainly at Hampton, we saw where he shot almost 70% at the rim. Good contortion ability. That's going to play into his favor. But still, as a volume scorer that really doesn't shoot the ball well, it's going to be hard to make it as that sort of role at the NBA. But his defense is going to buy him some time. I would expect that he, at a minimum, gets some really good invites somewhere. I haven't really seen much of him on his front when it comes to workouts and what teams are interested in him. But those are the types of guys that you'll see pick up an invite and at a minimum be a practice body in Vegas, and oftentimes play the last couple of games either in a consolation bracket or on the third and final regular game before they go into tournament play. You oftentimes see them expand the rotation on those couple of games. But certainly Warren's a guy that has a shot at the NBA. I would say that more than likely he's going to have to work his way up through a training camp invite and through the Vegas Summer League and making impressions there. But you never know. And with Davion Warren, the scoring ability is always going to be there. And the defense, the on-ball defense really sticks out. So anything can happen there. But that's all for the guys that are eligible to be drafted. I'm pretty sure Marcus Santos Silva isn't eligible because he never formally entered his name in the NBA draft. But if you're wondering what he's up to, or if you've been living under a rock over the last few months, he is currently on the Cleveland Browns getting ready for his first NFL preseason, where he'll have to fight to make the roster as a tight end. So completely different sport, completely different discipline. But I guess if he was eligible for the draft, there's a potential the team would draft him, but that's not going to happen. So we should have done an NFL draft preview talking about Marcus Santos Silva, but we did talk about him in our postseason recap for him as a player, and we mentioned his football route. Do check that out if you haven't already, and if you're interested in listening to about Marcus Santos Silva. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Eraser41 to see my thoughts on the NBA draft, whether or not that means Bryson Williams gets drafted, Adonis Arms gets drafted, or if you just want to hear what I think about the draft as a whole and what I think about the Blazers pick, I'm very hopeful that we can make the most of the 7th pick. You can follow me there at Eraser41. You can follow the official Locked On Texas Tech Twitter account at Locked On TTU. And as you're looking to the next day or so, just want you to keep an eye when you look at the NBA draft and notice that a lot of these guys are high-level high school recruits and have come into college with high expectations, and realize that this year's basketball team has the potential to bring that level of talent to the fray. And so on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Texas Tech, I'm going to take a look at some of the players that are newcomers to this Texas Tech basketball team. Now that it looks like we kind of hit a little bit of a dry spot when it comes to bringing on new additions with 12 scholarships filled, I'm going to look and evaluate which ones need to do what to make the rotation. So you can find that wherever you get your podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. You can leave us a review. I really appreciate all the feedback and support we've been getting. And you can follow us on YouTube at the Locked On Texas Tech YouTube account. We've been continuing to publish all of our podcasts there, and we're going to continue to do so. Glad to be up on YouTube after a few days off because of some technical difficulties. But anyways, that is all for me. Now, thank you for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. The first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. Search now for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders, the Odyssey Sports experts, the draft experts at Locked On NBA Big Board, and see what they have to pick. Five episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. Thank you for listening, and I will see you tomorrow.